Are you a former J1 visa holder? Or maybe you are in your current program? Or maybe you are aspiring J1 interns who wants to work and travel here in the United States? Well, there's one thing that is very important for you to know, which is your tax obligations here in the United States. So in today's video, I wanted to show you on what are your responsibilities for your tax here in the United States, how to file your tax return, how to file amended tax return, how to correct if you have filed incorrect tax return, if you have received your stimulus check, how can you be eligible to receive this, or if you are not eligible, how can you return this stimulus check to the IRS. So all of that we will be learning in today's video. So if you are interested, then just keep on watching. Welcome, my name is Rio from rioworldwide.co. I am a content creator here in YouTube and also a J1 visa program specialist. I work with aspiring J1 interns who wants to ace their interviews and have a successful visa program. In today's video, I am so very excited to show this to you because this is the replay of our live webinar last week with Sprintax that everyone have learned so much from this video. So if you guys are interested and if you want to learn more about your tax obligation, then just keep on watching. Here's what you are going to learn today. First is who is Sprintax and why I have partnered with them. Second is overview of your tax filing obligation as a J participant. Third is the stimulus payment eligibility. So a lot of people are confused either they are eligible or not. So in this video, we will also teach you on how you can find out if you're eligible for the stimulus payment that you receive from the government. And if you've ever find out that you are not eligible, we will also help you on returning them to the IRS. Also, if you have filed your tax incorrectly, we will also help you to file your amended tax return. So a few weeks ago, I asked you guys to send me all of your questions about stimulus check and tax return. So we have added it here in the quickfire questions and we will be answering it later on. And next is we will teach you how to use the Sprintax software to prepare your tax return so you will have a guide when filing it. And if you still have questions by the end of the presentation, you can send your questions and we are happy to assist you and answer it for you. And now let's welcome Anna from Sprintax. She will help us today to understand better our tax obligation as a J participant.
So unfortunately, because it is tax that we're talking about, I do have to start off with this disclaimer. So really this presentation is aiming to give everyone a general understanding of non-resident tax as it applies to J participants in the US. So really through the presentation, I'm aiming to give everyone tax information and not tax advice. So really the only actual tax advice that I'm providing to you guys is to make sure that you are doing something when it comes to your tax filing obligations and to make sure that you are being tax compliant. Additionally then, we would say tax is a little bit like your DNA. So although you might seem nearly identical to your fellow J participants on paper, one minor detail can make you be treated completely differently for tax purposes. So with that said, it is really important that you're using all of your own personal information when you are sitting down to prepare your tax return. And then lastly, because we are looking at the stimulus payment today, and this is something that has been regularly updated by the IRS, so the information provided on that is up to date as of today's date, June 3rd. So in weeks to come and days to come, do make sure that you are keeping up to date with any regular updates that there might be on the IRS website surrounding the stimulus payment. So then a little bit more about what we do here at Sprintax and who are we. So we are a part of the TaxBack Group, which is a worldwide financial services company which was founded in 1996. So Sprintax itself was created to help non-residents who might be international students, scholars, they might be professionals, they might be J participants like yourselves, in 2014. So since then we've helped over 500,000 non-residents across 200 nationalities to ensure that they are tax compliant and to prepare their compliant tax return. And so far this season, we've actually helped over 100,000 non-residents to prepare their tax return. And in terms of who we work with schools and universities and visa sponsors across the US and all around the world as well. So what Sprintax has to offer and what we can actually assist you guys with would be your federal and your state tax returns, Form 8843. If you need assistance with an amended tax return, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail in today's session, we can assist you with that. FICA returns, the item application form, back filing, and 24/7 live chat assistance during filing season. So that's just a couple of the services that we can assist you guys with here at Sprintax. So today we have a couple of interactive polls that we'll have during the session. So Ria will introduce our first poll.
First question for you is, have you filed your 2019 taxes? And you guys can click the answer through your screen. Either you say yes, no, I'm not sure if I need to file. So we have this information to know if you guys have filed your taxes. There you go.
Great. So it looks like 100% have said yes, they have filed their tax return. So maybe you guys are looking for some more information on the stimulus payment, which we will definitely go through in today's session. So some important dates for the 2019 tax filing season. So it can seem a little bit funny talking about the 2019 tax filing season when we are now in 2020. But the 2019 tax filing season is looking back on the 2019 tax year. So from the period of January 1st to December 31st, 2019. So we're looking back on that period to any income earned, any taxes withheld on that income, any days of presence that you guys have had while you were in the US. So we're looking back on that period to see whether you might have over or underpaid tax to the IRS or to the state tax authority. Then in terms of the filing deadline for the 2019 tax filing season, a really important date that you guys should all pop into your diaries is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. So the original deadline was Wednesday, April 15th, 2020, but as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the deadline has been extended to July 15th. So that's just over a month away, a month and a half away. So there's still plenty of time to prepare your tax returns if you've not done so, and to be tax compliant. So something that we really need to establish before we get into your tax filing obligations is residency for tax purposes. So this is something that can tend to confuse J participants in the US. So I'm going to break it down a little bit for everyone. So firstly, it's really important to mention that residency for tax purposes is independent of your visa and immigration status. So if you are a J1, summer work and travel, intern, trainee, camp counselor or au pair, or a teacher or a scholar, you are automatically considered a non-resident for 2 out of the last 6 calendar years in the US. After those 6 calendar years, the clocks would reset and you would get another 2 years of non-resident status. Then if you are an international undergraduate student on a J1 visa, you would be automatically considered a non-resident for your first 5 calendar years in the US. So if you've been here for longer than that 5-year period or that 2-year period, the IRS will need to use what is called the substantial presence test to determine your residency for tax purposes. So I know that might sound like a crazy science experiment, but I'll break it down a little bit for everyone. So essentially, the substantial presence test is looking back on the previous 3 years, on the days of presence within those 3 years. So essentially, it looks at all of the days of presence for the current year. Then it will take a third of the days of presence in the year before that, and a sixth of the days of presence in the year before that. And if that totals to over 183 days, then you would be deemed a resident for tax purposes. So I do appreciate that that can sound slightly confusing to figure out yourself. So if you're using Sprintax to prepare your tax returns, we can do the thinking here for you. So the first step you'll see is residency. We'll ask you to provide your residency related information, and we'll figure out whether you are a resident or a non-resident for tax purposes. Then here we just have a summary table on residency. So depending on your visa type, there's a summary of the years that you would have exempt from the substantial presence test. So really the years that you would have exempt as a non-resident, where your days of presence wouldn't be counted towards the substantial presence tests that we discussed. Then the next section is who has to file for the 2019 tax filing season. So really important to mention that every non-resident does have some type of IRS filing obligation. So the minimum filing requirement for all non-residents would be Form 8843. So even if you haven't earned any income, you would need to file Form 8843, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail in the next slide. But in many cases, you will likely have been receiving income. So you might have had a job during the tax year in which you were paid and you received taxable income from that. So as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, everything over $0 is now taxed. So some of you might have been familiar with the personal exemption amount of $4,050, which previously existed, but as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, this has been reduced to $0. So even from the first dollar, this will have taxable implications, and it's likely then that you will need to file a federal tax return. So you'll either need to file Form 1040-NR or Form 1040-NR-EZ. Then in terms of Form 8843 and what exactly is Form 8843? So as I mentioned, it is the minimum filing requirement for all non-residents in the US. So if you're a non-resident for tax purposes, you will need to file Form 8843. So essentially, it confirms your non-resident status to the US. So you're saying to the IRS, I'm a non-resident for tax purposes. Please do not count these days of presence towards the substantial presence test. So Form 8843 is a part of your tax record, so we would recommend preparing and filing this form for each year that you are a non-resident for tax purposes. Then an important slide is some of the tax documents that you might have received. So we have the W-2, the 1042-S, and the 1099 series document. So for you guys, as the majority of you would be J participants, it's likely that your income document would be a W-2. So this would generally outline any wages, any salary, any compensation that you earned during the tax year. So it would outline any income that you earned, as well as any taxes that were withheld during the tax year. Then it might be unlikely that you guys might have received a 1042-S, but in some cases you may have. So the 1042-S would outline any taxable stipend, any taxable scholarship, awards, any royalty payments, and each of these types of income would generally be outlined on a 1042-S document. Then lastly we have a 1099 series document. So this would generally outline any rental income, any investment income, any commissions. So these would be outlined on one of the 1099 series documents. Another slide that I wanted to include was on FICA taxes. So if some of you might not be familiar with what FICA is, it's essentially a tax that is paid into that would help you cover the cost of healthcare when you are over the age of 65. So in the eyes of the IRS, as a non-resident in the US, it's unlikely that you'll be here long enough to enjoy the benefits of that tax. So as a result, if you're a non-resident on a J1 visa, you typically should not be paying FICA. However, if you are on a H1B or a J2 or a TN visa, you would be subject to FICA from the first day of your employment. So our recommendation with FICA would be, if you have received a W-2, take it out, have a look for Social Security and Medicare withheld. If you recognise you've had this Social Security and Medicare withheld incorrectly and you're a non-resident on a J1 visa, so you shouldn't be paying it, firstly, we'd recommend reaching out to your employer and requesting a FICA refund from them. If they refuse and they don't issue your FICA refund, you can apply for a FICA refund using Form 843 and Form 8316. So if you do need assistance with preparing a FICA refund form, we can assist you with this at Sprintax. But the first call to action would be to ask your employer for the FICA refund back. Then on to state taxes then. So state tax rules differ from state to state, as do state residency rules. So some will say you only need to file if you earn over $8,000 or $17,000, whereas others will say you need to file from the very first dollar. It can also then depend on things like your visa type, this type of accommodation that you've stayed in while you were in the state, and the number of days that you've spent in the state. So at the beginning of the session, when we went through residency for tax purposes, that was on the federal side. When it comes to the state side of things, states have their own individual state tax rules and state residency rules. So in terms of assistance with the state taxes and your state tax filing obligations, if you need assistance with that, we can assist you with your state tax returns at Sprintax. So we can help you figure out whether you've triggered a state filing obligation and also prepare the relevant state tax forms for you. Now we're into our second poll, which Rio will introduce.
Yes, so for our second question, do you think you ever filed an incorrect tax return? You can either say yes, no, or I didn't misfile, but I forgot to file for previous year. Let me know, guys.
Great. Okay, so it looks like 100% have said yes, they think they have filed an incorrect tax return. So firstly, we'd say don't worry, because you're definitely not alone. A lot of non-residents have prepared incorrect tax returns, and we'll go through how to amend that mistake now. So maybe in terms of that, if you might have missed a year and you've forgotten to file for previous years, or maybe you forgot you filed incorrectly, so you might have filed as a resident when you were a non-resident for tax purposes. So with those two examples, we'd firstly say don't panic, but do set the record straight. So if you've forgotten to file for previous years, you can catch up and backfile at any point. So we would recommend catching up and backfiling as soon as possible. So the good thing here is that if you are due a refund in the previous 3 years, the IRS are happy to issue this to you. And in terms of assistance with backfiling, we can assist you with this on Sprintax. So when you log in, you can select the tax year that you need assistance with, and we can assist you with backfiling for the previous years. Then, if you might have actually misfiled, so you might have filed as a resident when you were actually a non-resident for tax purposes. Again, don't panic, but do set the record straight. So you would, in this case, need to file an amended tax return. So that would be using Form 1040X, the amended US individual income tax return. So the way that this would work is you would prepare a correct tax return, use this alongside your incorrect tax return to prepare and complete Form 1040X. Again, if you do need assistance with amended tax returns, this is something that we can assist you with here at Sprintax as well. Then another really important slide is the implications of not filing. So really you'll see here that the implications of not filing really outweigh any benefits that would be associated with not filing. So one that I've highlighted there that I really want to emphasize is the effect that it could actually have on your future immigration or visa status. So there could be some of you in today's session that are thinking that you might want to apply for a change of status. You might want to stay in the US in the future. And in that case, you could be asked for requests for evidence of tax compliance. So with that said, we really would not want to see tax be anything that would prevent anyone from staying in the US. So it is just really important that you are being tax compliant and you have evidence to show this to your, if you were asked for a request for evidence in a visa meeting, for example. Then also if the IRS are owed money, so fines and penalties and interest can build up on that money if they are actually owed. And then lastly, an interesting one is you might actually be missing out on a refund. So really the only opportunity to reclaim overpaid tax would be through preparing and filing a tax return. So there could be money sitting with the IRS waiting to be issued back to you. Then another really hot topic for this tax filing season, and one that has raised a lot of questions, I know in Rio's audience as well, it's been something that has raised a lot of questions. So the stimulus check, so the economic impact payment. Are you entitled to receive it as a non-resident? What should you do if you've received it incorrectly?
Yeah, so for my third question for you guys is that, have you received the stimulus check? Yes, no, or you're not sure because, for example, your bank account is closed already and you didn't receive any email from the IRS. But let me know in the screen. You guys can answer that.
You're definitely not alone. So we have already this season prepared over 2,000 amended returns, many of them as a result of the stimulus check. So we'll go through the eligibility. Are you eligible for the check? So really, in terms of the economic impact payment and what exactly is it? So it was provided for in the CARES Act that was recently passed by Congress. So really it was provided to help those who have suffered economic hardship as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So in general, it's available to US residents, US citizens, and those who are US resident aliens for tax purposes. So really the amount that you would receive would depend on your income level. So for those who have earned up to $75,000, you would receive the full payment of $1,200. Then after that $75,000 level, the payment would get reduced on different tiers up to $99,000 of adjusted gross income. Then for those who earn over $99,000 as an individual, you would not be eligible to receive the payment. Then if you are married filing jointly, provided that your gross income is under $150,000, the payment would be $2,400 for married couples filing jointly. Then for head of household, the filing threshold would be $112,500 for the full payment, and in order to be eligible, you would have to earn under that. Then the payment is reduced if you earn between $112,500 and $136,500. Then really important is who is actually not eligible. So you won't qualify for the payment if any of the below apply. So like we discussed in the last slide, if you've earned over the threshold, so $99,000 if your filing status was single or married filing separately, then $136,000 if you were a head of household, and $198,000 if your filing status was married filing jointly. Then, if you can also be claimed as a dependent on someone else's or another taxpayer's tax return, you won't be eligible to receive the payment. Then, also, if you don't have a social security number, you won't be eligible for the payment. So it's not available to those who would only have an ITIN. You would need a valid social security number in order to be eligible for the payment. Then really important, and something that we've highlighted there, is if you're a non-resident alien for tax purposes, you won't be eligible to receive the payment. So something that the IRS released at the beginning of May is that you also need to be a resident alien for 2020 in order to be eligible for the payment. So if you are a non-resident alien for 2020, unfortunately you won't be eligible to receive the economic impact payment. Now, another really common scenario that we've seen popping up as a result of the economic impact payment is non-residents who have filed incorrectly as a resident, and what should they do in this case. So if you're not sure whether you might have filed as a resident or a non-resident, the easiest way to find this out would be to look at your tax forms. So if you see on your tax form that it says 1040 or 1040 EZ, then it's likely that you filed a resident tax return. Then if it says 1040 NR or 1040 NR EZ, it's likely then that you filed a non-resident tax return. So if you recognise that you have filed a resident tax return when you were actually a non-resident for tax purposes, so you filed incorrectly, again, don't panic, but do set the record straight. So in this case, if you filed incorrectly, you'll need to file an amended tax return for all of the incorrect years. So like we discussed, the 1040X and the 1040 NOR. And then you might also need to make an amended payment. So when you prepare your amended return, it might be the case that you need to return some money to the IRS, and the IRS have asked that the amended return payment be returned separate to the stimulus payment, to the stimulus check. Then some additional instructions that the IRS have released on how to actually return the stimulus check. So the link to this site is displayed on the screen, and it's also given in today's handout. So if the payment was a check and you haven't cashed it yet, the instructions are to write void on the check, mail it to the appropriate IRS address, which we'll provide in the next slide. Also, don't staple, bend, or paperclip the check. And really important is to include a note. So include your social security number or your ITIN, and also include a cover note explaining why you're actually returning the payment. So, for example, non-resident alien for tax purposes received the stimulus payment in error, currently amending my tax return. Then there could be another case where you've received a check but you've actually cashed it. So what are the instructions there? Or it might have come in as a direct deposit. So again, instructions from the IRS are to submit a personal check or a money order to the appropriate IRS location, make it payable to US Treasury, and write 2020 EIP alongside it. So again, similar to the last example, really important is to include a note. So your social security number or your ITIN, and also a note on why you are actually returning the payment as well. Some useful IRS addresses then that the IRS have provided with different locations on where you should actually send the check to, depending on your location. So you'll see there's one there that we've highlighted if you're sending from a foreign country. So there might be some of you who have returned home as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So that would be the Austin address that is displayed below. But also the link to this, as I said, would be on the IRS website. It will also be displayed in the recording of today's session and also in the handout as well. So we've discussed amended returns a couple of times throughout today's session. So if you guys have received the stimulus check and you realise you've received an error and you actually need to file an amended tax return, we can assist you with preparing your amended tax return here at Sprintax. So when you log in, you'll select the tax year that you need assistance with and that you want to correct that tax year. Then we'll bring you through our questionnaire. We'll ask you a variety of questions. We'll ask you amended return questions, and we'll be able to prepare and populate your Form 1040X and your Form 1040NR. Now we're into the quick fire questions. So these are some questions that you guys have sent across to Rio. Some questions that are definitely common across all non-residents who are in the US at the moment. So the first one that we've had is, if you're filing from abroad, you realise you are due a refund, but you've actually closed your US bank account. So what are the options there? So really the options for receiving a refund would be through US bank transfer to a US bank account by cheque, or to forward the amount to your 2021 tax return. So the example that we're seeing a lot is that some Jays have returned home, closed their US bank account, and they're concerned about receiving a cheque with the difficulties in cashing cheques overseas. So there are some services there and want to assist you with this, with opening a US bank account virtually. So one that we have implemented here at Sprintax is TransferWise. So this is an option that's there if you have closed your bank account, you'd like to receive your refund virtually through your US bank, through a US bank account, and you can then transfer the funds to your own personal US bank account. Another really common question from non-residents is, can I e-file? So unfortunately, as a non-resident, there are very limited e-filing options available. So in most, if not all cases, you will need to physically print, sign and mail your completed tax forms to the IRS, or if it's a state tax return, to the state tax authority. So our recommendations with this, with actually filing, if you have returned home and you're filing from abroad, would be to file as soon as possible. Also use a registered delivery service if possible. So you are comfortable and you have an idea of when your tax return arrives in the hands of the IRS. Then lastly would be to keep your US bank account open. But as we've seen in the last example, if you have in fact closed it, there are options such as TransferWise and Sprintax that can assist you with that. Then another common question is non-residents who aren't sure if they filed correctly. So they're not sure which tax forms they filed, or whether they filed as a resident or a non-resident. So really our advice here would be, firstly, check what tax form you actually filed. So you should have a copy of what was sent, or if you're not 100% sure, go back to your tax service provider. Then if you have filed a 1040NR or a 1040NR EZ, you filed as a non-resident, and it's most likely that this was correctly, so it's likely that there'll be no further action needed. If it's then a 1040 or a 1040 EZ, you likely filed as a resident then. So the question has to be asked, are you a tax resident? So if you're not 100% certain and need some assistance with your tax residency, we can assist you with figuring out your residency for tax purposes at Sprintax. So we'll ask you residency related questions, and we'll figure out whether you are a resident or a non-resident for tax purposes. If you realise you are a resident, you filed correctly, not to worry, there's no further action needed. But if the answer is no, you're not a resident, alien for tax purposes, so you're a non-resident, then you would need to file an amended tax return that we've discussed a couple of times. So Form 1040X and Form 1040NR. Then another common question is, if you might think your tax return might have been prepared fraudulently. So how can you actually spot a fraudulent return? So this would be in the case where a fraudster is actually deliberately filing a non-resident as a resident, potentially to claim additional credit and things like that. So Firstly, similar to the last example, look at whether it was a 1040 or a 1040 NR. So if it was completed on a 1040 or 1040 EZ, it's likely that it was a resident tax return. And if you're a non-resident, then it was filed incorrectly. Secondly, then the application of the standard deduction. So for non-residents, the only individuals who can claim the standard deduction of $12,200 are Indian students and trainees. So if you're not an Indian student or trainee and you're a non-resident and you recognise this standard deduction has been applied, that would be an area of concern. And then thirdly, if they've claimed credits that are there for residents, so American Opportunity Credit, for example, then if there's no preparer name, signature or ID, or if it was marked as self-prepared when it's actually in fact not. So they'd be some of the signs to look out for when you're looking for a fraudulent return. Then another question that Rio received is about W8BEN. So what is Form W8BEN? So really we'd say if someone does ask you to prepare a W8BEN, it's usually a good thing because they are trying to actually tax you correctly. So if you've received types of income like interest or rent or dividends or royalties, you would need to provide a W8BEN in order to establish that you are not a US person, to claim that you are the owner of that income, and also, if it's applicable, to claim a reduced rate of withholding. So there might be a tax treaty between your home country and the US, and you would need to prepare W8BEN in order to make sure that you would be able to claim that reduced rate. Then some of the tax statistics from Sprintax's 2019 tax season so far. So really, I have placed a lot of emphasis on tax compliance as we've moved through today's session. So tax compliance is one of the most important elements and really hugely important, but it is good to see that there are actually monetary benefits to being tax compliant. So some of the statistics that we have here from the 2019 tax filing season so far. So on the federal side, we've seen that around 51% have received an average refund of around $1,200. Then on the state side, around 68% have received an average refund of around $520. Additionally then, here ourselves at Sprintax, we prepared over 100,000 tax returns and around 2,000 plus amended tax returns. So with the refund statistics, really you can see that although tax compliance is the most important element, there are definitely monetary benefits to being tax compliant as well. Then I wanted to include some slides on using Sprintax to prepare your tax returns. So as I said, Rio does have a link to Sprintax, which is in today's handout and will be shared with you after the session. So if you're not sure what Sprintax does, we do assist non-residents with preparing their compliant tax returns. So with providing assistance and through Rio's link, if you click on Rio's link, you'll be redirected towards the customized login page, and you can simply log in if you've created an account before, or simply create an account here quickly and easily. Then we'll move into residency. So a really important step, one of the first steps you'll be greeted by is we'll ask you for your residency related information, and from the information that you provide to us, we'll be able to figure out whether you are a resident or a non-resident for tax purposes. So if you're able to freely move to the next step, you would be a non-resident for tax purposes. If you receive a pop-up letting you know actually you are a resident alien and you cannot continue to use Sprintax because we are a non-resident tax prep provider, but we will recommend TurboTax, our resident partner, where you could prepare your compliant resident tax return with them. Then we'll move to your income information. So we'll need to ask you for any income information that you would have. So whether you've received a W-2, a 1042S, a 1099 series document, or whether you've actually received multiple income documents from the tax year. We'll ask you to populate an electronic copy of the relevant tax form that you have onto the system at Sprintax. Also, an important thing to mention is you'll see in the bottom right hand corner of that screenshot the pop-up saying got a question. So we do offer 24/7 live chat during filing season. So if you do have any queries about your own personal tax position, the live chat team are there throughout the season to assist you and to walk you through the process. Then state taxes then. So the logic here is that after we figure out that you are a non-resident, you can continue to use the software. We've gathered your personal and income information. The logic behind Sprintax is that the system will figure out whether you've triggered a state filing obligation for the states that you have lived and worked in. So the beauty here is that you can prepare your federal and your state tax return under the one roof in one seamless process. And another great thing is that the system does have knowledge of all of the individual state tax rules, so it saves you guys from having to become too familiar with it. Then once you reach this stage, you'll be happy to know you're nearly fully tax compliant for the tax year, but the process isn't finished just yet. So you'll see in this case the non-resident has a federal tax return prepared, which would cost $37.95, and a state tax return prepared, which would cost $29.95 per state tax return. So once you move past the review your order stage, you'll be able to download your tax pack. So the tax pack will have your pre-populated tax forms. So in this case, you'll see the non-resident has a 1040 NREZ. We would have also prepared their Form 8843, and if they had a state filing obligation, we would prepare the state tax forms for them. Then on the left-hand side, you'll see the instructions. So we would provide instructions along with the tax form. So how do you actually file your tax form? So the process isn't complete when you just print out the tax form. You will need to physically sign them and mail them to the IRS, or if it's a state tax return, to the state tax authority. So really just important to emphasize that the process isn't finished just yet, that you will actually need to mail it, but your forms will be pre-populated for you guys. So if any of the attendees do have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the question box, and we can address them now in today's session.
Yes, if you guys have any questions that you think that we haven't discussed, or something happened about your bank account or your stimulus check, let us know so we can answer it now.
And I know I did see a question pop up in yesterday's session. So there was a question on Form 8843, so who actually needs to file this? So I think there was a participant who was becoming a resident alien and wasn't sure whether they need to file Form 8843. So really, Form 8843 needs to be prepared by anyone who is a non-resident for tax purposes. So really, if you are a non-resident and you've had days of presence in the US, you would need to prepare Form 8843 for every year of non-resident status. We have a question here from April. Okay, so I filed through TurboTax. The steps I have to take to amend the return and the check to the IRS. Okay, yeah, so if you filed through TurboTax and you're a non-resident for tax purposes, yes, you would need to file an amended tax return. If you've also received the check, you'll need to return the check. So first thing to do would be to double check, are you definitely a non-resident for tax purposes? So you can do that on the Sprintax system. The first step would be residency. If you figure out you are a non-resident but you filed through TurboTax as a resident, yes, so it would be the amended return. So if you do need assistance with your amended return, we can prepare and populate your amended tax forms for you. And then you would also need to return the check to the IRS. So the instructions that we went through in today's session would be relevant to you. So do make sure that you are returning the check separate to your amended return payment. And in terms of where to send the check, there are a list of IRS addresses which will be in today's session and which are also on the IRS website and in today's handout. Yeah, we've one more question here. So how much would it cost to file an amended tax return, and do we have a deadline to return the stimulus check? So in terms of preparing an amended tax return, if you're using Sprintax to do that, the cost would be $70.95. And then there may also be an amended return payment that you might need to make. So, for example, if you've used TurboTax, you might have claimed the educational tax credit, which is not relevant for non-residents. So in that case, you might need to make an amended return payment. Then in terms of the deadline for returning the stimulus check, really we just recommend returning it as soon as possible. So if you haven't cashed the check, follow the instructions that we provided and return the check to the IRS as soon as you can. They haven't issued a deadline, but we would just say to send it as soon as possible. Great. I'm not sure if we've any more questions. Feel free to pop them in now. And as Rio said, if you do need assistance, we're always here at Sprintax. You know, any tax-related queries you have, feel free to reach out to our live chat team. Also reach out to Rio and she can reach out to me, myself. So we'd be more than happy to answer more tax-related queries if maybe you're too shy today, or maybe something doesn't spring to mind right now. So definitely we're always here to provide assistance to you guys. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's any more questions coming in. Another support we do have is we do have our live chat, but we also have our support email, hello@sprintax.com. So the live chat does tend to be the most popular, but if you would rather email, that support is there as well. And do be sure to use Rio's link. I'm sure she shared it with you previously. It will also be in the handout as we discussed today. And yeah, looking forward to providing assistance to you guys throughout the remainder of the season.
Yes, thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate all of your help for today.
No problem at all, and thanks Rio for arranging the webinar. It's great to give some non-resident tax knowledge to your audience. So I hope everyone found today's session helpful, and I hope everyone is staying safe and well as well. And thanks to you, Rio.
And that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this jump-packed videos. If you do, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and comment down below if you still have any questions about your tax return and your stimulus check so we can help you out. Also, please don't forget to check the description box below because all the links that we have mentioned in the video will be in the description box below. And also, by the way, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so you'll always be notified whenever we upload new jump-packed videos like this. And while waiting for that video, please don't forget to check these two videos right here. I make a lot of J1 videos that is for sure will help you in the J1 program. So make sure to click these two videos right here and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Bye for now.